In this moment of great global challenges, from global inflation to the climate crisis to Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, we're bringing together the broadest possible coalition of partners to deliver results. At COP27 in Egypt, I made it clear that thanks to the bold agenda of our administration, we pursue from day one to tackle the climate crisis and advance energy and security at home and around the world. The United States will meet our emissions targets under the Paris Agreement.
The communication lines are back open between President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping after months of a rocky U.S.-Chinese relationship. But what is the truth here? Let's check in now with senior correspondent John Huddy. He joins us live now from Bali. And John, what was your biggest takeaway, and what are other people saying about this meeting between the two presidents today?
Yeah, well, the official kickoff, by the way, John, of the G20 is today. It's now the overnight hours, Tuesday morning here in Bali. But I think really the kickoff, the official opening, was this bilateral summit between President Biden and his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. It's really something that all of us in the media were waiting for. We were anticipating. President Biden arrived here late Sunday night. Xi Jinping arrived Monday about mid-afternoon. And then the meeting took place around 5:45 local time, 4:45 a.m. In the morning, Eastern time. It was a 3-hour meeting, and then followed by Xi Jinping, by the way, didn't take any questions from reporters, unsurprisingly. But President Biden did, and he addressed the media about 40 minutes late. And really the takeaway, I mean, along with the range of issues, what we were anticipating were several main issues, main topics. 1, Taiwan, of course. 2, the war in Ukraine. 3, technology, the competition over technology and the global economy. And then also what was discussed was North Korea, making clear and telling Xi Jinping that unless China reins in North Korea, the United States is going to continue to protect its allies in the region, notably Japan and South Korea. And the president went on in part saying this about North Korea. Have a listen.
I made it clear to President Xi Jinping that I thought they had an obligation to attempt to make it clear to North Korea that they should not engage in long-range nuclear tests. And I made it clear as well that if they did, they, meaning North Korea, that we would have to take certain actions that would be more defensive on our behalf, and it would not be directed against North Korea. It would not be directed against China, but it would be to send a clear message to North Korea.
Whether or not China does that, well, that's a big question, right? On the issue of Taiwan, President Biden, as I've been discussing, said that he wants peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. This has been an issue of contention, and that believes the U.S. continues to support the one China policy, but China and Xi Jinping really kind of taking a hard line, saying that the continued militarization and support of Taiwan as an independent country remains a red line for China. But having said that, President Biden seeking a more friendly tone and position, saying that that doesn't mean it should devolve into conflict. Here's what he said about Taiwan.
I absolutely believe there need not be a new Cold War. I've met many times with Xi Jinping, and we were candid and clear with one another across the board. And I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. And I made it clear that our policy on Taiwan has not changed at all.
And in what was a somewhat surprising start to the press conference with President Biden, the president talking, and kind of what some are saying is basically a breach in presidential protocol, talking about the midterm elections in the United States, saying, we talked about this earlier, John, saying that the election showed the strength and resilience of the American democracy. And he went on to say a strong rejection of election deniers at every level and a strong rejection of political violence and voter intimidation. So that's certainly getting some criticism from those, again, saying that it was a breach in presidential protocol. One final point on Taiwan. The president says that it's his opinion that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is not imminent. John, I'm going to be heading to Taiwan on Wednesday, so I'll be very interested to see if people there share the same opinion as President Biden. John, back to you.
All right. John, stay safe in your travels. We'll see you then. Great reporting. Thanks. All right, let's bring in now former Trump 2016 foreign policy advisor and Newsmax contributor George Papadopoulos. Great to see you, George.
Thanks for having me, John.
I want to play that video. I don't know if we have it on tap, but I'm sure you have seen it. It's the handshake moment with President Biden and President Xi. You can see Xi's the one actually there waiting, playing the host as Biden walks up. This is something that Gordon Chang pointed out on Twitter today. You could see this throughout their meeting, that Biden seemed to take a back seat to President Xi on numerous occasions, like he was not the dominant one in this meeting, and it's not easy to watch if you're an American.
No, it's not, John, and this is a prime example of what weak and feckless U.S. leadership really invites in the international scene, and that is both chaos, as we've seen in Ukraine during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is really burgeoning now into a potential nuclear conflict. We're seeing more aggressive saber rattling in the Taiwan Straits, and this meeting that President Biden just had with the Chinese leader came a little over 3 months after Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, in which that really resulted in these other military exercises and other threats from China towards Taiwan. So when a president showcases this type of weakness, both domestically and abroad, our allies and our foes alike are watching, and they will react appropriately. And this is why I believe the Chinese leader there did act as the host, and he was there inviting President Biden to shake his hand and show that he is the alpha male in this situation, and that President Biden will be listening to China's demands regarding not only Taiwan, but possibly even the Russia-Ukraine conflict, in which China has really buffeted Putin's stance regarding that conflict as well.
Now, the question, I asked this to Senator Grassley a while ago, and apparently since Republicans are not going to control the Senate, we'll never know. The answer is President Biden compromised when it comes to China? Things that were not obviously discussed, Hunter Biden's business deals in China, and also the COVID pandemic. George, I think any meeting that maybe those undertones are there, but at least when it comes to the COVID pandemic, you have President Biden criticizing Republicans for, quote unquote, believing in political violence and voter intimidation. But he's sitting across the table from a guy who's having his thugs beat down Chinese citizens right now if they fail to comply with the COVID zero policy and stay locked in their apartments. Don't you think President Biden could have struck at least a little bit more critical tone towards Xi and pretended like there is some sort of pushback against what the Chinese are doing to their own people, let alone to our people and to other countries?
Well, John, before the midterms and after the midterms, China was and continues to remain America's preeminent political, security, and economic threat. And Senator Grassley is absolutely correct to pressure the Biden administration to not only hold the Chinese accountable for their egregious human rights violations regarding the crackdown against the Uyghur minority or against democracy protesters in Hong Kong and their own people post-COVID, which really reverberated throughout the global economy based on the various supply chain lockdowns that we saw emanating from China and how that affected not only the domestic market here, but inflation globally. So, of course, the senators had to pressure President Biden to ramp up the pressure against the Chinese to really help unleash freedom within China, because what happens in China, unfortunately, does affect the rest of the world. And we do live in a still globalized world, albeit less globalized as before. But China is a serious player on the international stage. What happens in China will be felt in America. And the President of the United States must hold China's leaders accountable for not only what happens between our relationships with that country, but also domestically. So I think Senator Grassley was absolutely right on the money here to have President Biden bring this up.
George Papadopoulos, former 2016 foreign policy advisor to President Trump. Great to see you.